Good day to you. I'm making this video a little bit late today, later than I normally do, because I was facing some ethical decisions. I was facing some ethical decisions having to do with vaccination. I'm so pleased that I'm going to be vaccinated at 7:15 tomorrow morning. I found out about this because I went on to the St. Luke's website. My doctor is a St. Luke's provider, and they said that you could begin registering for the vaccination if you're in Group 1B, which I'm in because I'm a teacher. So I called the hospital and I got my appointment for tomorrow. And then I faced a kind of an ethical dilemma because my mom is 91 years old and she really needs to have it before I do. But she's not on the computer, she's not that savvy with phone calls. So I wanted to make sure that she was able to get scheduled. But at the same time, I wanted to get the word out to my colleagues that this is what I was able to do if they wanted to try it. And so I faced a dilemma of, if I announce this publicly, will it slow down my mom's situation? And is it even right for me to consider who should be prioritized with the vaccination schedule, or should I just let anybody I know about this information? In the end, what I decided to do is I called my mom, and she's called St. Luke's. She's going to get a phone call back. They're so busy. And then I announced to the rest of the faculty. So I did prioritize. I did prioritize for my mother. I guess you can say it's an ethical approach that I took, that my family, my own mother, is more important than other people. It's an awkward thing to think about, but that's what ethics forces us to do. Ethics forces to wrestle with really, really tough decisions. And there is no right or wrong when it comes to ethical decisions. A lot of times you make a decision you think is based on ethics, and you just don't really have a comfortable feeling whether what you did was the right thing. And that's the nature of the beast. But the point is to take those decisions under considerations with an ethical background. And that's why we're taking on this chapter today. It's on media ethics. And what I did with the vaccine was related to media because I found out about it on the website and I sent emails out. I'm using modern day non-legacy media in an ethical context. And so we're going to study ethics today, and many people may think that ethics are the same as morals. They're used interchangeably. That's not the case. Morals are the way that you believe. Morals is how you think of right or wrong according to a very specific code that may not be rational. Like people who are religious, it requires faith, right? It requires faith because it's not rational. Now, people who are religious may say that's not the case, and I'm not seeking to challenge their righteousness of believing in a God or say that they are wrong or anything like that. I'm just saying that that's why you have faith, right? It requires faith that what you're believing in is actually true because there's not a rational basis for it. So that would be considered a set of morals, a religious set of morals that goes on. Jewish people not eating pigs, for example. That's a moral conduct. So that's not quite what we're talking about with ethics. Ethics is an academic study of what is best for society. That's what ethics is all about, and it requires a considerable thought process to arrive at decisions that are ethically based. At the end of the day, ethics is all about how do you feel when you put your head on the pillow and you go to sleep? Do you feel good about yourself? Do you feel that you've made good decisions? If you do, then you're probably being ethical. So we're going to take on several major thinkers who have developed ethics today. I've got some links in the email to help show you what they look like and to get across some of their main ideas. And the first one is my own personal hero, Aristotle, the father, so to speak, of communication. Aristotle, and his main contribution to ethics was what we know as the golden mean. The golden mean, M-E-A-N, like a mathematical mean. And he said that if you achieve the golden mean in your life, which I'm going to explain momentarily, then you are a virtuous person. You have virtue. You have good character to yourself if you achieve the golden mean. Now, Aristotle was writing in 350 BC, right? We just have language for the first time. If you remember back to 350 BC, we're just getting the alphabet. And so he's able to develop his thought process about ethics, right? It's no secret that writing allowed for this kind of development of thought process. And by the way, Aristotle is no stranger to a lineage of smart people because his teacher was none other than Plato. And Plato's teacher was none other than Socrates. And Aristotle himself was a teacher of Alexander the Great, the greatest military commander during that time period that walked all the way around the Mediterranean. So he's got a lot of credentials. His dad was a doctor, and that imparted to Aristotle the habit of recording and observing things. And he had this school that he called a peripatetic school. Peripatetic, peripatetic school. It's from that word foot again. It means walking around. He'd like to hold his classes by taking his students and sitting under a tree by the river. That's the way that Aristotle taught. So what is the golden mean? The golden mean is all about striking a balance between excesses. Striking a balance between excesses. And he used terms of emotion like courage is a golden mean. But courage is between some other between extremes that would pull it off center if you went into the extremes. So at one extreme you might have recklessness. Like, that's not courage. Like, running into a house that's on fire is courageous, but if the house is so far gone with fire, that's reckless, right? So reckless and courage. And then on the other side is cowardice. Cowardice is fear, right? Like afraid to speak up if somebody's being racist in public and you don't want to be, the person who makes things uncomfortable. That would be cowardice. That's not courage either. So courage is in the middle, and that's what Aristotle says that you must do. So let's look at a media event to see how that might apply. What happens if a boy tries to swim across the Delaware River and dies from drowning? It's a very common occurrence for those of us who live in the Poconos. People try to swim across to New Jersey all the time, and they don't realize the current in the Delaware, and they end up perishing. And so one question is, what do you show when you go to present this? What do you show? Do you show the body? Well, some people would say no, that is reckless because it's going to hurt people. It's going to hurt people who know the victim. It's too painful for the family members. And other people would say, well, I don't think so, because you really need to show the true horrors of what happens if you try to swim in a river without a life jacket on and you're not that great of a swimmer. You could die. So we need to show people how it really is. And so maybe the middle ground, the mean, is to show not the body, but to show the ambulance going away, to make it as real as possible without showing the body. It's an example of a golden mean. Now, you may find another way to reach a golden mean, but the point is you're trying to reach in between extremes with Aristotle's golden mean. Let's move on to our next philosopher now. We really are talking about philosophers who have written on ethics. And the next one is a German. His name is Kant, K-A-N-T. He's in the late 1700s. He was a German philosopher. And he said that he departs from Aristotle insofar as morality or ethics lies not in the action of achieving a middle ground, but rather morality lies in the actor. The person lies in the actor. And that people should be seen as ends. Like how a person is an end. They're not a means to an end. A person is a means to an end if you're meeting them because they may provide a connection to a job, right? That's making a person's a mean if that's why you're meeting them. But Kant said that the person is the end, and that humans do have the ability to reason, and because of that, there should be in place an ethical perspective that he calls the categorical imperative. Categorical imperative is what we get from Kant. The categorical imperative is where you act according to universal laws, and these laws are just true no matter what. And so one of the laws might be that you tell the truth no matter what. You tell the truth no matter what. So if you're a news organization and one of your employees, who everybody's been fond of for many, many years, has been accused of sexual harassment, do you report that? Or do you protect your colleague? Do you protect your colleague because of your feelings for that colleague or because you don't want to come under scrutiny yourself? Kant might say it's a universal law that you reveal if there is an accusation made of sexual harassment no matter what. And so you report that even though you're reporting on your own news organization. And so Kant's categorical perspective is very rigid, right? The categorical imperative says that no matter what, there are universal laws in place when it comes to the media, and you must follow those laws. It doesn't matter how people's feelings will necessarily get hurt, even though the person is the end and not a means to an end. It really is about preserving these universal laws so that all humans can live under the same conditions. Now we're going to move on to the next philosopher. His name is John Stuart Mill. He's from Britain, from England specifically. He's writing in the 18th century, and he is writing about the principle of utility, which he coined as utilitarianism. That's his philosophy, utilitarianism, which basically means the greatest good for the greatest number of people. Or another way to look at it is that which causes the least amount of pain. And actually, John Stuart Mill's utilitarianism broke from Kant insofar as he said that the consequences of the actions are important in deciding what is ethical. That the consequence, if a person, I was watching Dr. Phil last night, and I don't know why. Dr. Phil was on television, and he was advising an African American female who had engaged in a marriage with a man from Nigeria who she met and married in Nigeria and came back, but they've been working on a visa for 2 years and it hasn't happened, and she sent him $10,000. So they asked Dr. Phil his advice, and he's decided to say, I'm going to tell you my opinion. I think you're being scammed here. $10,000 has gone missing. And it's an example of utilitarianism insofar as the consequences of the action are important in deciding what is the ethical thing to do. And Dr. Phil was definitely hoping that he was going to achieve a consequence where she was going to decide not to stay with this man. Actually, she resisted. She said she was going to stay with it, and she appreciated Dr. Phil's advice. So the consequences didn't necessarily work in this case, but that's what utilitarianism is about. It's the greatest good for the greatest number of people. We can see this in play in the media, in American media in particular, because we have a lot of media content that is just designed to be as popular as possible. It's designed to reach as many people because that will raise the advertising prices. And so a great example of this is if I were to leave the room and everybody in this class was in that room and I said, I want you to put a radio station on this radio receiver and I'll be back in a couple minutes. If I came back, I'm pretty sure what station would be on there would be a top 40 radio station or greatest hits. Excuse me one sec. Got to let my dog out. Yeah, so what radio station? That's what I'm asking. What radio station would I find when I come back? Odds are it's going to be a top 40 radio station, not because that's everybody's favorite music, but because it's the station that the most amount of people would want to listen to. It causes the least amount of offense. I'm not going to find a country station. I'm not going to find an R&B station. I'm not going to find a rock station. Probably it's going to be pop music. That's utilitarianism, and it drags down, right? Drags down the intellect of the content, or how edgy the content might be, or how political the content might be, because then you lose people, and it's not what the American media system, for the most part, is about. Now let's move on to the next philosopher. His name is John Rawls. Rawls, John Rawls. He's an American philosopher, actually, in the 1900s, the early 1900s, and he's operating from the principle that which is just is also fair. That which is just is also fair. And he's trying to look at the humanistic side of ethics and saying that each person has an equal right to basic liberty, compatible with other people's liberty. Like, you can have freedoms as long as it doesn't infringe on other people's freedoms. And he said that unfortunately social and economic inequalities exist, and they are arranged to certain people's advantage. And white people, for the most part, white men, for the most part, white privilege. That's what that's all about. For example, if I'm on an elevator, I don't think twice about it. A black male is on an elevator and other people get on. He has to worry that they're thinking that he's going to be up to some kind of criminal activity. Now, this does not exist in every case, but it is common enough. You talk to enough black men and they will tell you that this is what they have to go through in their life. That's an example of white privilege. And John Rawls was recognizing that. And so he said, we must fix this. We must fix this. And the way that we do it is when we approach people, we have to hide behind what he called a veil of ignorance. A veil of ignorance. And you know what a veil is, right? You put it over your face. And so a veil of ignorance is meant to get across that you don't see the other person's color. You don't see their education level. You don't see whether they're a male or a female. You don't see whether they're straight or gay or any on the spectrum of LGBTQ. Or you don't see if they're disabled. You see beyond that, right? Because there's a veil in front of them, and you judge them based on the way that they behave. And so when it comes to media, a lot of this has application in hiring decisions. And you still see today that many media companies are not populated by executives anyhow who are Latino, Asian, African American, or LGBTQ. That media still are populated mostly by white people and mostly by white men, certainly in terms of the executive decision-making people, the producers, the writers, the directors, the financiers of media content. And so why is that? There's something going on there, right? Because when you look at it, blacks and Hispanics make up significant portions of our population. Hispanics somewhere around 18%, and African Americans 12%. Why don't we have, therefore, those proportions in media ownership, as well as other industries like in sports and in coaching positions? And the only way to fix that, right, is to put that veil up, so that when you interview people, when you consider people for jobs, that you're not seeing the color. Now, maybe some people are going to say, well, I want you to see my color. I want you to see my color so you know what I have to go through. That's a whole other debate, but John Rawls is attempting to do away with social inequality. Next up is an ethical perspective that comes from a commission. It's called the Hutchins Commission. And the ethical perspective is called social responsibility ethics. Social responsibility ethics. This set of ethics came about in the 1940s after World War II, when there was a lot of cynicism in the media, a lot of cynicism about the Cold War with the Soviet Union, a lot of newspaper headlines making us afraid that the Soviet Union might launch nuclear bombs on the United States, a lot of really nasty things still being said about Japan, our enemy from the 1940s. If you went to a film in the 1940s, it might have a cartoon trailer at the beginning that was called literally Kill a Jap Today. Kill a Jap Today. You could see that in American theaters. So there was a Professor Hutchins at the University of Chicago, and he wanted to get together a commission to say, something's not right here. What can we do to impact the media? And this commission came out with social responsibility ethics. And it's based on the First Amendment. The First Amendment is not enough to protect journalists, is what Hutchins said, as for reasons that we discussed in the last class. So therefore, we need a set of social responsibility ethics. Social responsibility ethics based on the idea that media are privileged. They're privileged because they can summon thousands of people just with their program, sometimes millions of people. If anybody in NBC wants to get to 1 million people, they can do it, just go on a TV show. Versus the average citizen like yourself, what if you want to hold a press conference? You want to hold a press conference because you're not able to get the vaccine because you're a young person. Who's coming to your press conference? Nobody. Zero. Right? Because you're a regular person. And so that's what is trying to be addressed by the Hutchins Commission here, that media are privileged. So therefore they have to act with that kind of responsibility in mind. They have to offer truthful, comprehensive, and intelligent news. They have to provide a full access to the day's news. They have to present a representative picture of constituent groups. If you're going to cover an anti-abortion march, then make sure that you're also covering the other side and all sides in between. Like, there is no, not everybody is either against or for abortion. For abortion is an awful thing to say. There's many different nuances, right? Incest and all kinds of other positions. All of these should be represented in news reports. And so you can read more about the social responsibility perspective and what it tries to get across in the chapter. And our final ethical perspective comes from Cecilia Bach. Cecilia Bach, first female that we've really acknowledged in this class as a thinker, writer, etc. I wish we could do more, but unfortunately the discrimination, the male discrimination against females getting into print publication is difficult to overcome. But nevertheless, we have Cecilia Bach in 1934, and she has this Bach model, named after her last name, Bach model for decision making. And she says that when media companies are making decisions about personnel or about content to offer, that there are really three steps to be ethical. One is to consult your conscience. Like, what do you really believe? Secondly is to seek alternatives, to get outside of your conscience and think, what do other people believe? And thirdly, in order to do that, you hold an imaginary dialogue with everyone involved. I certainly was holding a dialogue with other chairpersons at ESU before I sent out the email about the vaccine this morning, because I am well aware that some people believe that the virus is a hoax, and some people believe that the vaccine is dangerous and it may cause problems that they didn't anticipate. And some people may believe that there's a government conspiracy behind the vaccination, that it's a way of the government tracking you. I have to consider those arguments. Those are important ethics to other people. And so the way that I phrased it in my email this morning was just letting you know this is what I did. I'm not saying you should do this. Just saying this is what I did so that you have that information. All right, now we're going to go to some issues that get at ethics in media. And the first issue is truthfulness. And truth does matter in journalism. You have to be truthful. Unfortunately, this last year, there have been accusations flying all the time in media, across media, and between media and the White House, and between the White House and media about lying. And you can see the damage that it's doing, right? Because people don't trust when there's lying. And the whole concept of fake news speaks to this. Like, what is fake news? And unfortunately, there are examples that you can read about in the book. Janet Cook, a writer for the Washington Post, Jason Blair, writer for the New York Times, they lied in stories. Janet Cook wrote a story about a very young child. Well, that's redundant. A child who was a heroin addict in Washington, D.C. And her argument was, well, I drew attention to this problem. It exists. But yeah, I happened to make up the person who I wrote about. They were fiction in the story. She got busted, and the Washington Post had a hard time recovering its integrity. So truthfulness does lie. It causes people to lose faith, trust, etc. in institutions when they believe that lies are coming out of them. Next up is an issue of conflict of interest. Conflict of interest is where the people who produce media have a conflict in their interests. They have a financial stake in an organization that would otherwise be covered negatively. And so since they have a financial stake in it or another kind of relationship with that organization, they don't cover the news. For example, Disney owns ABC. We know that from an earlier class. Disney owns ABC. What if there was an accident at one of the Disney parks and a person was hurt on a roller coaster ride, maybe killed? Would that be covered by ABC News? Would it be covered, or is there a conflict of interest there that if ABC News covers it, it's going to cause Disney to lose business and its reputation will be damaged? We see this throughout the media. We have to ask those questions. Jeff Bezos, who owns Amazon, also owns the Washington Post. Do you think there are going to be negative stories about his wealth in the Washington Post and about his lack of giving? I'm not saying that it does have a lack of giving, but you think that would be a possibility? No, there's a conflict of interest when people are in different boards, different positions, are married to people, are friends with people. It's very difficult. And in fact, many media organizations, they have rules in place. They have a code of conduct, which is really an ethical code. And one example of that might be no journalist can accept a gift of more than a $25 value from another organization because there's the potential for a conflict of interest. You get free ski passes from Camelback Mountain as a reporter. Are you going to be likely to report that Camelback Mountain's trails are in bad shape, etc.? That's what we're talking about here. Now we're going to go on to the next issue, which is sensationalism. Sensationalism gets back to utilitarianism because it's all about making media as sensational as possible because that's what people want to see. Nobody says that they want to see somebody injured in a car accident, but you slow down and look all the same because it's sensational. And that's what is going on in media. The biggest headlines, the biggest scandals, the biggest drama that you can get across. And there's even a word that's used to develop this further called tabloidization. Tabloidization is when respectable media like CNN, Fox, etc., they report on what the tabloids are reporting. The National Enquirer. That's what tabloidization is all about. Another issue is photography in the media. You know, photography, as we know, can be journalism in and of itself. It's called photojournalism. But what do you show? When you show war, do you show a bloody body? I mean, we kind of have an opposite view in this country to how other countries view violence in terms of photography and video. And that is, we tend to allow violence in our fictional programming, you know, all the CSI shows and all the films that have guns and murder going on. We show that, but when it comes to a news story about somebody being shot in a real drug bust in Center City, Philadelphia, no, we don't show the person. Whereas other countries, they actually show a person who's been shot in war to show the horrors of war, but they restrict violence in fictional programming. This is loosely related to photography, but that's what I'm talking about. I'm also talking about with photography that you can manipulate photos today. Almost every actor that you see on a cover of a magazine, it's not really them. The wrinkles have been taken away. Blush has been put onto their skin. You know, parts of their face have been modified so that they're not lopsided. Yeah, photography, there's a lot of ethical questions that go on about that. Now let's talk about enforcing ethics. Ethics are enforced by the code of conduct that I talked about earlier that most media organizations have, but also some media organizations have a position in them called an ombudsman. I wish it was ombudsperson, but it's ombudsman, O-M-B-U-D-S-A-N. And that's a person in a media organization who's supposed to be representing the interests of the audience, of the readers, of the viewers, of the listeners. And so if a person is covered in a story unfairly, that the ombudsman is going to represent them in having their say, because they're up against a big media company and they might be an individual person. Now let's move to talking about ethics in advertising. Some people would say there are no ethics in advertising. You can see an advertisement for a product that's supposedly free, but then there's this huge shipping and handling costs and tax, and you may have to register, and you may have to sign up for future contract for future product purchases. So it's anything but free, right? But that word is loosely used. And actually, a lot of countries have regulations about when you can use that word free in your advertising. But the big problem with ethics in advertising is advertisers have a lot of control over the content. I mean, if you're a radio station and one of your biggest accounts is Allstate Insurance, you're going to be very, very careful about reporting negatively, not only on Allstate, but on the insurance industry as a whole. You don't want to lose that account. It's not like Allstate is calling up a radio station saying, hey, just want to confirm we're going to take out a bunch of ads, but no negative stories on insurance. No, that's not what happens. It's more like implied, right? And then finally, an area of interest in ethics is the attacks on women. The attacks on women specifically in online media, specifically in gaming. Are you familiar with the term misogyny? Misogyny is the abuse of women by males. And a woman, she can become a video gamer who's really good, but she's going to be much more subjected to comments about her breasts, for example, comments about her looks, comments about her hairstyle, and then starting to call her names if she gets aggressive and starts winning, like bitch. And there's a lot of research in this area. My wife, Kelly, has done research in this area. If you're interested, I can get it to you. But it's another area of interest when it comes to ethical decisions in the media. So a lot of ethics is individualized. It's for you and you alone to decide whether you've made the right decision. But the point is you go through a thought process that is based on an academic framework that helps you reason through your decisions from an informed standpoint. And that's ethics. Have a great day.